út svona, góðan daginn. Herru, já, það voru komið með nýjan link til að komast inn á og við ætlum að fá hann Thomas Maurer til þess að ræða Arc server. En áður en að við byrjum þá erum við með voucher fyrir það sem vilja þá geti aukið líkurnar á að fá voucher í Microsoft Prof. Þannig að endilega bara spyrja spurningar og sjálfsögður er íslenskur ríkisborgari. Hello Thomas Maurer, thank you for joining this last session this year. So it is great to have you. I've been trying hard to get you to Iceland, but the COVID has been very annoying. So just thank you very much.
Yeah, well, thank you very much for having me. It's an honor, obviously, and I would love to be there in person. Hopefully, this will happen in the future. But again, it's an honor to be here today and to speak with all of you about Azure Arc. So, perfect. Should I start?
Yeah, just go ahead.
Okay, that's awesome. So welcome everyone. As I said, it's great to speak to you, all of you today. My name is Thomas Maurer. For those who don't know me, I'm a cloud advocate working at Microsoft. And many people, before we actually started the presentation, many people usually ask, what does a cloud advocate do? It sounds very marketing-y, very salesy, but actually we are part of the Azure engineering team. So what we do in a very high level, we do a lot of different things, but on a high level is like creating content, delivering content, such as, for example, this presentation today. But then also a very important part is to gather feedback from customers and communities to figure out what is working and what is not working, and how can we improve our Azure services and products to make sure that they work for our customers. So again, if you have some feedback and if you have questions, please feel free to reach out to me and my colleagues. I'm very much focused on hybrid technologies. I come from the infrastructure side. I was a Microsoft MVP for Hyper-V and then Azure Stack and Azure for a couple of years. So hybrid obviously always played a big part of it, and today we're going to talk about managing your hybrid environment. I'm going to talk a lot about like managing servers. I'm going to show you some examples with servers, but that doesn't actually limit, and I will talk about that as well. It's not just about managing servers, it's also, for example, managing Kubernetes clusters, SQL servers, and a lot of different other things as well. So I'm going to show you a little bit of that, but taking as an example, I will talk a lot about Azure Arc and how to manage your hybrid environment. And I promise you, I have a lot of demo. So I have a couple of slides at the beginning and then some explanatory slides between and at the end. But mostly I will show you the product and the demo and let the product speak for itself to see how it actually looks like. Before we get to that, I quickly want to talk about why we're actually doing this, right? I want to quickly set the stage for everyone so we understand why we're actually using that and what we actually can do and why we did develop that. So what I want to show you here is what we figured out is that obviously, and I don't have to tell you because you all know, but the customer environments have gotten increasingly complex over the last couple of years, if you will, and I'm sure they will get more complex in the future as well. So why is that? So we identified like 3 of the main reasons. Obviously there are more, but these are like 3 of the main reasons we are actually looking at. So first of all, IT admins, IT developers, in general, need to manage hundreds, if not thousands, of different applications, right? And some of these applications are probably SaaS applications where you don't need to do much. Some of them are very modern applications written in modern languages like .NET Core. They're serverless, based on PaaS technology, containerized, and so on. However, we also have a lot of obviously traditional applications running in virtual machines or physical servers even. And IT needs to take care of all of these applications. Now, the other thing is what we saw is that IT departments need to take care of very diverse infrastructures. So they have usually have their own data centers. They probably have outsourced some servers to hosters. They have branch offices, factories. They have some stores at like retail stores, edge computing. They also have different types of hardware environment, like different OEMs. They have IoT devices and so on. So again, this also adds a lot of complexity. And the last part, what we can see is that some of customers are using multi-cloud, right? I'm sure you have heard that before, and maybe some of your company is talking about it. So multi-cloud is there, and again, it adds a lot of complexity as well. And again, this can happen that customers, for example, decide to go with Microsoft Azure as their main cloud provider, which is actually a fantastic idea. But they probably have already used another cloud provider before, or some department has used it, and they're not just going to migrate now everything to Azure. Or even some companies, they probably have their strategy is to use multi-cloud, right? And again, I mean, you know already that even using one cloud provider obviously is pretty complex, and we have a lot of different services, we have different products, and a lot of things you need to learn about the cloud itself. So adding more cloud providers definitely doesn't make management of that easier. So we obviously see hybrid as a very important part. And I quickly want to just show this picture here. This is a picture I took at Microsoft Ignite back in 2019. This one here in the picture is Jason Sanders. He is the engineering lead for all the Azure engineering teams for the different Azure services. So he's directly under Scott Guthrie. And he did basically the second keynote after Satya Nadella. And he talked a lot about hybrid, because obviously we were launching products and services like Azure Arc, which I come in a bit in a minute. But I wanted to show this picture because I want to quote him on something. He said that we know and we understand and we believe that hybrid is an end state for our customer and not just the in-between state until everything is moved to the cloud. And I think that is very important. If you look at that, this is what we understand. We know that customers cannot necessarily move everything to the cloud, or they don't want to move everything to the cloud. So there are reasons like, for example, you can't do it for data regularities, data sovereignty reasons, latency issues, right? If you don't have a data center in a specific country, or you don't have a good connectivity there, you can't probably use that. So that is why you probably don't want to move everything to the cloud. But however, you can take advantage of the cloud to take advantage of cloud management to bring that on-prem and make your on-premises environment better. Or you can at the same time, you could like get Azure services into your data center, and we're going to show that in a bit. And we have a large set of hybrid services, right? We don't just have one hybrid product. I often get asked by people, so now we have Azure Arc, do we still need Azure Stack? These solve different kind of challenges, right? So we have this set. We don't believe that there's just one solution to hybrid. We have a real set of services and products when it comes to hybrid. And I will talk a little bit about it in just a bit, but I would also want to mention is what a lot of people also sometimes don't know is that we already have this large set of hybrid services, right? Hybrid does not just came with Azure Stack or Azure Arc or Azure IoT. We already had hybrid services from the ground up when Azure was built, when it came to management technologies. For example, look at update management. If we talk about security and identity with Azure AD, with Security Center, Sentinel, we have When it comes to, like, for example, SQL Server, where you could stretch your databases, DevOps tooling, and then much, much more, right? We didn't do a great job always to talk about this and making it easy to discover all these hybrid services, but we hope we can address that a little bit with Azure Arc. So I want to go on and give you a quick overview. This is basically an overview about what we currently offer in the hybrid world. And no worries, again, I'm going to switch soon to demos, but I think it's very important to understand where we are right now. So let's start on the bottom right. Obviously, we have our Azure IoT solutions, a lot of different services to manage if you're working with IoT. Again, I don't have time to speak a lot about IoT today, but we could speak for it for like days or weeks about our IoT offering. Then in the middle, you can see we have our Azure Stack portfolio. So Azure Stack now is not just a single product anymore, right? It's now a portfolio or a family of solutions and products which help you to probably modernize your data center or your edge location with Azure Stack HCI, like a hyper-converged infrastructure solution, which helps you with virtualization, which is absolutely great. Then we have Azure Stack Hub, which actually brings you the cloud-native Azure experience in your data center. And then we have even Azure Stack Edge, which brings you AI capabilities at the edge on those locations you need, where you, for example, can't wait for a response of Azure. Okay, so the next two things are really related to Azure Arc. On the left side, you can see we are bringing Azure services to any infrastructure, meaning our customers told us they love our Azure services, for example, like Azure SQL. However, they can't really use it in the specific Azure region. Like for some parts, like they can use it for some parts maybe, but they can't use it for one specific location because they don't have good enough internet, or they, again, data sovereignty challenges there. So what we are bringing is we're bringing these Azure services to any infrastructure. So that doesn't mean if you're running VMware in your environment, if you're running physical servers, if you're running Hyper-V, if you're running Azure Stack, if you're running at other cloud providers, we want to bring our Azure services to that infrastructure. And then the really main part of Azure Arc now is the line in the middle here, that single control plane with Azure Arc. So people told us, hey, in Azure, we have these management tools, this management control plane to manage all these Azure services, and that is great. We need something which we can also add our resources which live outside of Azure, and that is exactly where this comes in. So what are we talking about when we talk about the single control plane? That it basically helps us managing services which are running on premises, in multi-cloud environments, or at the edge. And it will help us to organize and govern these resources at scale, because we do that already with Azure resources, so we just apply that for resources outside of Azure. It will help to actually adopt developer cloud practices to your on-premise environment. So the cloud is obviously great, full of speed. You can do DevOps like super easily, but we're going to bring that to your on-premises environment as well. And then we want to implement and take advantage of the Azure security suites, basically our products, which you then can actually connect to your on-premise environment, and you get, for example, recommendations on that. So instead of talking about it, let me just switch here to my demo environment. And again, I also want to quickly highlight, if you have any questions, feel free to ask these questions in the Q&A. We will then answer, or I will check and try to answer your questions at the end of this presentation, right? So here we are back in the Azure portal, and you can see here, I'm in the all resources page. And this allows us really to manage all the different Azure resources. And you can see here, everything in Azure basically is an object and a resource. So you can see here, for example, we have virtual machines here. We have like a public IP address, routing tables, disks, databases, PaaS services. Everything is an object, and everything has a type. It's usually part of a resource group. It's connected or deployed in a specific Azure location or region. And then obviously it's part of an Azure subscription. And then we can also use tags to organize these resources. Now, our customers saying, okay, wow, this is great. This is good to manage and do everything with Azure resources, but we want to also use that with our resources which is outside of Azure. So let me quickly show you that. And I want to quickly edit this. So I want to quickly limit here the view. So let's just have a look at our virtual machines running in Azure. And then also I want to see all the servers running outside of Azure. And I already joined a couple of servers here using Azure Arc, and I'm going to show you a little bit later on how I did that. But I just want to quickly see all the servers I'm managing. So now in my list, I can see here my Azure virtual machines, as well as my servers, Linux and Windows servers running outside of Azure, which I joined using Azure Arc, right? So what I did in the background, I deployed an agent to that server, which makes it connect to Azure. And now it looks like an Azure resource. And I will talk more about that. Now, what I can do here, I can take advantage. I can, for example, do some grouping by type. So I can like a little bit organize my resources here. So you can see on the top, I have now my Arc servers. And on the bottom, I have my Azure VMs. And what I can do now, I can also go forward and, for example, use something called tags to actually find out what servers belong to a specific cost center. So let's use that. And I created here a tag for cost center. So I tagged my resource with cost center. So let me show you. I want to know now all my servers belonging to cost center 1001. And I can select that. And now you can see here, I can see my Azure, my virtual machine in Azure, which is a Linux VM. And I can also see my server running outside of Azure, which is now an Ubuntu machine. And you can see here, I even have more tags here, which also define the location of that server and where it is and so on. And I will talk a little bit about that a little bit more in a bit. Now, again, you will now probably say, Thomas, this is great. Now I have that single pane of view, single control plane, but there must be more, right? Now I can at least get an overview about my servers. I know now what I'm managing, right? And this is already a lot. Trust me. Like when we speak to companies, and I remember that when I did consulting, and I asked them like, hey, can we have a list of all your servers? They said, yeah, we will provide it in we need 2 days to actually get that list. If you're using like something like this, you basically have that list in just a couple of seconds, right? So, however, there is more, obviously. Now we also want to manage these resources. And one thing I want to show you is actually Azure Policy. Now, you might be familiar with Azure Policy already, because this is something we use to configure our Azure network, our Azure cloud environment, right? So think about this helps us to keep control of our environment. So if you are in a company where you give access to IT staff, like IT operators and developers, they can now go out and create resources in Azure, and this is great, right? This is something you want to do because you want to give them the speed and the agility of the cloud. However, you want to keep control. You don't want every person deploying the largest virtual machines, right? So, for example, we have these great MV2 series virtual machines. They have a couple of 100 cores, and I think now we go up over like 20 terabytes of memory or something like that. Marcus just showed these huge virtual machines, and they drain your credit card in like 3 seconds. So you don't want everyone to deploy these. The same thing is you want to probably limit your Azure environment, that not everyone can go out and deploy to every Azure region, for example, or all the Azure resources. So Azure Policy can help with that. Now, what a lot of people don't know is that there's also something called Azure Guest Configuration Policy, and that helps us to keep control about the operating system settings of our Azure virtual machines. Doesn't matter if it's Linux or Windows, but we can do that. So what I quickly going to show you how that looks like. So if I do an assignment here, I can create a new assignment with policy, and I will do now an initiative. Initiative is just a collection of different policies. I can then set the scope. So the scope can be set to, for example, a management group, a resource group, or a subscription. And then I want to select the definition. Now, we already have some built-in definitions, which you can leverage today if you go out. And you can see here we have a list. Some of them are industry certifications. So you can see here, for example, if I want to make my environment UK official and UK NHS compliant. We also have Swift, we have PCI, and ISO, and many more, which help you to actually audit your environment and then find the things which you are not compliant with and then help you to fix that. Now, there are also some technical ones. So I want to show you a simple one about passwords. So this one does actually go out and audit machines with insecure password settings, right? So this goes out, does an audit of the operating system and figures that out. And so I could now select that and can go out and deploy these settings and then figure out what I'm compliant and not. So I will not do that because I already have done that, like in a good cooking show. Because this will take a while until everything does the audit. So I already deployed this. So if I go to the compliance view, I can now see how I'm doing with my compliance. And you can see I'm not doing a great job in my environment. But you can see here the policy assignments I'm not compliant with. And I can also see there's some I am compliant with, luckily, right? So I'm doing a great job. So I'm not really caring about the ones I'm compliant with. I'm caring about the ones I'm not compliant with. So here is the one I just showed you, the insecure password settings. And you can see I'm not compliant with my company, with the security policy. So not every server environment is compliant. And if I scroll down, you can see here, again, I told you it's an initiative, so it's a collection of different policies. So some settings I'm not compliant. And if I scroll down more, you can see here some settings I'm doing well. So now I want to know which resources are not compliant with that. So if I click on that, I can now see here, if it's loading, I can then see here my non-compliant resources. And these can be, again, if you look at the resource type, these can be here Microsoft Compute virtual machines, which means this is an Azure VM. But with Azure Arc now, I can also see my hybrid compute machines, which are basically servers which are running outside of Azure. So this policy now, this Azure guest configuration policy, cannot just be used to audit your Windows virtual machines. It also helps us to audit my servers in my environment. Doesn't matter where this server is running. Okay, so with that, let me quickly jump back here and let me go quickly through the slides to actually show you what I just showed you. So as you know, in Azure, this is a high-level architecture slide of our Azure Management Suite. And no worries, we'll go through that. There's a lot of information on that slide, I know. But this is actually the control plane we are using to manage our Azure services. So let's start on the left side. So we as Azure customers, we are basically using tools like the portal, like PowerShell, the Azure CLI, APIs, the SDKs to interact with Azure. And when we interact with Azure to manage our Azure environment, deploy new stuff, and so on, we are actually interacting with the Azure Resource Manager, which is the magic behind all of the organization and deployment parts, for example. So it's responsible for, like, for example, role-based access controls, logs, subscription management, the search, the indexing, the grouping, the tags I just showed you. It also takes care of like policies and logs, which I also just showed you. And then you also have an engine, for example, to deploy stuff. On the top, you can see we also have some additional management services for monitoring, update, backup, security, and so on. And until we released Azure Arc, the Azure Resource Manager really was used to manage Azure resources like virtual machines, Service Fabric, Kubernetes clusters, web apps, databases, IoT stuff, everything which basically lived in Azure, right? Now, with Azure Arc, what we did, and I just showed you, is we basically extended Azure Resource Manager for resources which are outside of Azure, like virtual machines, Kubernetes cluster, and data services, like and SQL servers and stuff like that, which are at your location, where in your data center, in your branch offices, even in another cloud provider, right? So we can now take advantage of the Azure Resource Manager to organize and govern our resources, and also take advantage of the management experience. I also quickly want to highlight that this is then not designed to just like remove all the local management tools you need, right? You have. We also don't want to create the dependency to the cloud. So at the end, you're basically, if the cloud or your internet connectivity is not working, nothing is working anymore. That's not the goal. The goal is really just to help you in addition, and you can still use your local tools as well. So let me show you how that actually works and how I can onboard things to Azure Arc. So back in the Azure portal, what I can do here, if I want to manage Azure Arc, I can search for Azure Arc in the services, and you can see here I find the Azure Arc. And this will take me to the Azure Arc Center, which we basically introduced at the latest Ignite online in 2020, which gives you an overview about how you get started. So if you want to get started with this, I will show you that in a bit. That's how there you find all the information. You can then also find about the different infrastructures things we are doing and the data services we are doing here as well. On the bottom here, you can also find information about cost and pricing, and I will talk about that a little bit at the end. I'm sure there's some questions about that as well. And then you can see here, I can get an overview about all my Azure Arc joined resources. So again, it's not just about servers. It's also others like, again, databases, Kubernetes clusters, and so on, as you can see here, where we have a list of all that. And even Azure Stack HCI has Azure Arc already directly built in. So it basically connects your Azure Stack HCI cluster directly within Azure. So what I want to show you here is, again, I'm going to show you first here the server part. So I go to servers, and what you find here is a list of servers I have already connected, right? These are servers I have already added. These are living again outside. Some of them are running here in my own data center, basically a computer underneath my desk or behind my desk. I think you can, in some pictures you can see it. And they run there, and I connected them. Some of them are running at other cloud providers, right? And I connected them here as well. So first, I want to show you how we actually add a server. Now, I told you that we basically install an agent on that machine, and then this will connect to Azure. So there's obviously a documentation page which shows you exactly how this is done, but then we also wanted to make it easy for you to onboard new servers, right? So if you click on Add, we give you like a wizard option. So the first one is really like adding servers using an interactive script, and we will have a look at that, how we generate that script, and then you can take that script, run it on your server, and you need to log in with your Azure account, and then the server will be joined. Now, if you want to do that at scale, you don't want to go to every single server and log in with your Azure credentials. So we help you doing that with a service principal name. So you can actually build your automation, and you can easily onboard hundreds, if not thousands of servers in a couple of minutes, basically running a script through those machines. Now, again, to make it easy, we're going to have a look at this one first here, so you understand what that script actually does. So in this wizard, it will tell us, okay, what are the requirements? I'll quickly jump in here. These servers obviously need to have outgoing traffic to the Azure URLs. Some of them, there's a documentation which URLs they are on port 443. So it's encrypted traffic, outgoing traffic, no ingoing traffic into your systems. It's just outgoing from that agent. And then you obviously need local administrator rights on that server to actually install that agent. And then we can actually go out and manage these servers then in a resource group. So we will need a resource group to join these. So the next part will be that we need to join that server to a subscription, right? We need to select a resource group. So I have here, for example, let's just select this one. We need to select an Azure region. So this is basically the region, not where this data of this server goes. It's just about the metadata that agent connects to, right? So that's where we actually, that agent, so we need to select the closest. The best thing is we can select the closest region of that server in this case, or again, it could also be a Kubernetes cluster. We will need to select if it's a Linux or a Windows VM. That obviously depends on what script we have, a bash script or a PowerShell script. And it can also configure if it's behind a proxy. We then can set already some of the tags if we want to, so it gives you some recommendations what to use. Again, this is not something you need to do, or you can use your own ones, or you can do that later, right? We just want to make sure that we help you here. And this will then generate that script. Now, this script does basically 3 things now. It does basically download the agent, then install the agent, which in the Windows world is an MSI file. And then the last command is actually registering that machine then to the right tenant, to the right subscription, to the right resource group, and so on. So this is how you register a machine. And if we go back here now, the machine then after a couple of minutes will show up here. And I can show you here how that looks like. So if I click on one of these machines, I actually get, you can see here, it looks like an Azure resource, like I told you, right? It's part of the Azure resource group. It has a location. It's part of a subscription. It has on the left side here, you can see it has an activity log. I have role-based access control, which is pretty great because now I can actually, like, for example, if this is SharePoint server, I can only give SharePoint admins access to that specific server. So they can see other servers and other admins which do not need access to the SharePoint servers. They can see that as well, as you're familiar with Azure. We also get some additional information here, like computer name. You can hear I also have the full qualified domain name. You can see here that's a local domain joined server. Get operating system, and so on. Now, the interesting part here is now on the left side with our management and settings task. So the first thing I want to highlight here is on the settings, we have the thing called extensions. So you're probably familiar with virtual machine extensions for your Azure VMs. Now, when the Azure Arc agent is deployed, you can also use extensions for your on-prem or hybrid service, I should call it. Again, these could also run in other cloud provider. And then you can actually go and have, like right now we have 3 extensions here for, let's say, run a custom script on that machine. We can configure PowerShell desired state configuration, or we can deploy the log analytics agent, which can give us then additional functionality to manage our server. We also get security center options. So what we get here, for example, we can get security recommendations for that specific server. So you can see here, Security Center cannot just take advantage, or Azure Defender for servers cannot just take advantage of your Azure VMs or servers running in Azure, but also of your Arc machines. If we scroll down, then we have more options here. The first thing I want to show you is logs. So I already used Azure Arc and then deployed the log analytics agent to it. So I get this additional functionality, for example, to run log queries. And you probably say, Thomas, okay, you could have done that before with Azure Log Analytics. And yes, we are using Azure Log Analytics here. Now, the difference here is the role-based access control, right? Before we had Azure Arc, we basically, if we wanted to give someone access to run log queries against a server, we needed to give them the access to the whole Azure Log Analytics workspace, so they could basically see all the logs from all the different systems which we had in there. Now you can see here the scope is only this specific server. So I can use here the keyword query language to basically generate my queries. I already prepared one here, a very simple one, which just gives me an update summary. And then gives me the results here, so I can actually see what is going on, how many updates are missing, and stuff like that. So pretty cool. I can go through. I can do some advanced. I can also obviously add other queries like system event logs. I can basically browse through. I think not 100% sure. I'm going a little bit off. So let's go for event. Let's see if that works. So I can go actually and browse. Oh no. Let me see, maybe I did it wrong. Okay. Well, I need to double check that. But however, so I can go through these logs. Maybe I did not select the event logs for this to be transferred. But again, you can get all these things in here. We can also enable Azure monitoring for that. So I did that already. And the first thing I want to show you is the performance part. So this is the basic of the monitoring information you obviously get. You can now find the information like how much storage is used, how much is free. I can see CPU utilization. You can also realize that this server doesn't do that much. I can see memory utilization, IOPS, throughput, latency, like disk latency. That's also very important for if you're a storage admin or server admin, you know what I'm talking about. Disk space used, also network traffic in and outgoing, and a lot of that, you get that information. And you can also configure alerts as well. So you can then set an alert and say, okay, hey, when that happens, I want to have alert here. Something else I want to see is the dependency map. And what I can see here, and no worries, I will zoom in a bit. You can see in my servers, and I can see now all dependencies. So all the endpoints or servers where it connects to. So this server obviously connects to a couple of endpoints with port 443. And if I open that up, I can see actually where it's connecting to. Now, interestingly, obviously here, for example, this is the Azure Arc, one of the Azure Arc endpoints that server connects to. So I can see the public ones. But if I scroll down here and zoom in here, you can see here I also have this on port 135. I can see that this here, that server connects to a local domain controller. So I can see here very easily the dependency. So very nice benefit, very, very quickly to get that. Now, there is more. There is, for example, change tracking and inventory. So I can, with change tracking, I can get an overview about what are the changes happening to that specific server. So I can see here when some changes are happening to, for example, Windows services or files or whatever, events which are happening and so on. I can also go to inventory and see the server inventory, the software inventory of that server. So you can see here what updates are installed. I can also look for software. I know, for example, for a fact that on that server, I installed Microsoft Edge. So I have a browser on that, so I can find that and I basically can go out now and uninstall it because probably should not have a browser on that specific server. The same thing for obviously for registry and Windows services as well. And the one thing I want to highlight before I go to update management is also like here, I can also find the policies, by the way. The ones I showed you before was the view where I was like, I'm the policy administrator over the whole environment. So I can push out these policies across my environment and then see what resources are not compliant and also go out and actually go and speak to the people who own these servers and how to fix that. Here, I'm now the server admin, so I only see the policies which are assigned to that specific server. So you can also see that I'm also not compliant with the insecure password settings. There's also another one which actually goes out and checks that my servers should all be in the same time zone. So you can see I'm not compliant with that either. What I can do now is I can see more information why that is. I could now go and obviously manually change that. Or I can even create a remediation task here to actually fix that, right? Keep in mind that some of the parts are still in preview. I will talk about that as well, but that is actually how it works. What we can also do here is update management. I think that is one of the most interesting ones. So I can see here which updates, as I could see with the logs, right? I can see here that I have a couple of updates which are not installed. I can see the update classifications, and since these are all just like preview and definition updates, I'm still compliant. But if there, for example, would be a critical update, or if then that's not just a preview update, then I would obviously be non-compliant. So, but still, I want to now patch that server. So what I can do is I can schedule an update deployment. And I can create a new deployment job. So in this case, I'm just going to patch a single server. I'm going to show you quickly how I can do that, obviously, when I have more servers later on. But so I'm going to call it patch rec server. So in this case, it already detected that this is a Windows server. It would also detect if obviously it's a Linux server. I can then configure the runtime settings, and then I can also select my reboot settings. So I can say, hey, do not reboot after installed, never, always reboot, or reboot if required. And that sounds like a good idea. I can then go and schedule it. Now, I can update now, which is like in 5 to 10 minutes, it will start the update job. However, since I'm doing a presentation right now, it's probably not the right thing to do. So I'm going to schedule that for later. And the same thing, you obviously want to do that probably off work hours, right? So you could go out and schedule that an off hour, and then you can even make it a recurring job. So in that case, you could say I want a weekly or monthly on every Tuesday, for example, or every Thursday I want to go out and patch. I can then configure some more settings here. I can select the classifications I want to roll out, can include and exclude updates. I can even run a pre and a post script if I need to. And then obviously I can go out and create that update deployment. Now, again, I'm not going to do that because I already have created schedules for this. But that would be one way. Now you say probably, Thomas, yeah, but like if I have 100 machines, I don't want to do that way. So yes, that's not a problem. Same as for inventory and change tracking, we have here a button called Manage Multiple Machines. And again, this service is not something which is pretty new. It's just the integration with Arc. But we have update management it's part of Azure Automation and Log Analytics for quite a while. So if I go here, it will take me to my automation account. You can see here on the left side, I have also change tracking and inventory there. But here I can now see all my machines which are joined to that specific update management solutions. You can also see, and I can see here non-Azure VMs. I can also see Azure VMs next to it. Unfortunately, I shut down all of them right now. So I see that some of them are not compliant, some of them are, and some of them have missing updates. I can also go and figure out what these updates are. So what I can do now here, I could go here and schedule an update deployment. Now I'm not going to show because the wizard almost looks the same. The difference here is I can obviously not just select different servers at the same time, I can also select groups or create dynamic groups of servers. So for example, I can use tags to say, okay, we have a tag for update group. We have update group 1, which update group means like all the servers in update group 1 will be patched on Tuesday. All the ones in upgrade to group 2 will be patched on a Thursday. So in this case, for example, if you have 2 domain controllers, you patch 1 on Tuesdays and 1 on Thursdays. So in that case, or simpler, if you have different other systems like that, you can do that. Okay, so before I jump back into the slides again, let me see how much time we have left here. I want to quickly show you 2 other things. Again, I promised you that and I will talk about that in the slides a little bit more, but since I can show you that today, I will also show you that. It's not just about servers. We also have, for example, SQL Server here, so we can join a SQL Server, and then this will give us security recommendations specifically to SQL, and gives us some specific assessments about SQL and how it's configured and what is not good with my SQL Server here, so I can take advantage of Security Center. I can also have a look at my Kubernetes clusters. So I joined here 2 Kubernetes clusters. You can see here, these are running outside. So these are running, one of them is running basically in my Seattle location, if you will, and the other one is running here in my data center. So if I go and click on this, I can now see that, again, like with the server, it looks like an Azure resource. I can use tags and so on. I can then also see here, for example, that I can configure metrics, alerts, and logs, and so on. I can also have a look at monitoring for my Kubernetes cluster. So the similar like I can do with an Azure Kubernetes service cluster, with an AKS cluster, I can now get some monitoring for my on-premises Kubernetes cluster. In theory, that Kubernetes cluster could even run at not a cloud provider, right? How cool is that? I can then also take advantage of, for example, policies. So I can, the same thing as I configure server and check that they are compliant, I can do the same thing for Kubernetes clusters as well, and make sure that they are configured securely. I can also now, the other part is obviously I want to manage the updates or of my applications on that server. So what I did here is I configured a update config or a app configuration, if you will. And it says basically, get me the app from that repository and check if there are any changes to that app, and then deploy it on my Kubernetes cluster. Now think about if you manage this app, you manage apps now, you can just go out and use a technology called GitOps to actually do the change of the app configuration, and it will automatically deploy to your Kubernetes clusters, right? So that is pretty cool. I mean, it's cool if you have one cluster, but it's cool, even better if you have multiple clusters and you want to manage all these app deployments on that. And Azure Arc can help you with that using GitOps. So let me switch back to the slides. So I showed you a quick demo on onboarding servers. I want to give you some key takeaways of what I just showed you. So first of all, Azure Arc enabled servers, they work with basically Windows and Linux servers, physical and virtual machines, running in your private owned data center, branch office, or even at your other cloud provider. They're completely domain agnostic. You can take advantage of security and governance. You can use the built-in policies and security center and so on to get recommendations. And one part I haven't really spent much time, but it's a very important part, is the role-based access control. So again, you can go out and just give access to the admins, which actually need to have access to that specific server. If you are a managed service provider, you can also use it together with Azure Lighthouse. So if you haven't looked, Azure Lighthouse helps you to manage like multiple customer tenants, if you will. And obviously that then integrates with Azure services, but also with Azure Arc as well. And then obviously you get that one place, that central place to manage all your resources at scale. You can see here it's a searchable inventory. You can use tagging. You get a consistent experience. You can go with your Azure portal. You can also use the CLI. You can use PowerShell and so on as well, or any basically APIs you can against Azure Resource Manager. So with that, I want to make a step back about the server part. Obviously, what can now Azure Arc do? Obviously, one of the parts is organize and govern across different environments on Kubernetes clusters and servers, for example. It can help you then with like cloud sprawl to manage that wherever it's running. And then you can also use Kubernetes app management. So you can actually go out and deploy applications, as I just showed you, using a technique called GitOps to basically deploy applications and settings in an automated manner from a Git repository. So if I do a change to that Git repository, the Kubernetes clusters will reach out and will check, and then we'll apply that change to the Kubernetes cluster or the application running on that Kubernetes cluster. And then I haven't really talked about that, but running data services anywhere. So this one is super interesting. Again, our customers told us they want to leverage technologies like Azure SQL, for example, not just in Azure, but like on their location, right? They really like it. They want to use it there. They cannot use it in the cloud for some reason. With Azure Arc, we actually enable that. So you can, for example, run Azure Managed SQL in your own location. Now, I know that there are a lot of technical people in this call, so I want to also quickly show this one. This is a high-level Azure Arc architecture slide. The blue stuff is all Arc technology, so I want to quickly go through just really quickly for those who are interested. Again, if we are interacting with Azure, we start on the left side. We have different management experiences like the portal, the CLI, PowerShell, the SDK, and so on. And we're interacting, as I mentioned, with Azure Resource Manager. Now in blue here, you can then see we have something called the RPs, which are resource providers, which on the bottom, you can see we have the Arc resource provider for server, which then the agent connects to that resource provider and makes it showing up in the Azure Resource Manager. In the middle, we can see that we have the same thing for Kubernetes clusters, and on the top, we have the same thing for Azure Arc enabled data services, which again, as you can see here in wave one, we have that for Azure SQL as well as Postgres. as well. And that actually is funny. What we actually need to, if you're a customer, you want to deploy Azure data services using Azure Arc, what you need actually is a Kubernetes cluster. Doesn't matter where it's running. Can run even at another cloud provider, but then you can deploy Azure SQL on top of it. And importantly, you can also use your local management tools. As I mentioned before, you can still use them to manage these resources so we don't create any unnecessarily dependencies on the cloud itself. I quickly want to go back. Sorry about that. It was a little bit fast. So the Azure Arc enabled servers, they are currently in GA. So these are like fully released service. Obviously, we're going to add more and more features over time. However, that you can already fully use. The Kubernetes and the data services part are currently in public preview, so you can go out and try them out. However, be careful if you're going to deploy, like don't deploy it in production environments, right? But try it out so you can test it and make sure that everything is running the way you want. So another step back, again, Azure Arc is just one part of our hybrid offering. We have much more. I talked about the Azure IoT suite, about our Azure Stack portfolio. A lot of people, as I mentioned before, they ask me, does this replace Azure Stack? And absolutely not. They're addressing different scenarios, different challenges customers have. You can even combine them, right? In some cases, you probably just want to have Azure Stack, Azure Stack Hub, or Azure Stack HCI, or Azure Stack Edge. In some cases, you just want to have Azure Arc. And in some cases, you want to combine them. You, for example, have Azure Stack Hub, you have then the Azure Kubernetes engine on top of it, and then you connect that using Azure Arc to Azure. So pretty cool. And again, there's much more to our hybrid story than just with time to show you in this session. But again, you get the point. So with that, I want to say thank you very much, and I quickly have a look at the Q&A here. What the questions are. So I'm going to scroll up a little bit on the questions. Is there so one of the questions I see here, is there a difference technically, or is it regards to licensing costs running all in Azure or doing hybrid connected with on-premises server? So there's I want to take time. I'm sure there's multiple angles to that question. So first of all, I want to talk about pricing. So Azure Arc enabled servers has a couple of different things, and I showed you can find the pricing online. Currently, Azure Arc enabled Kubernetes clusters as well as data services are free to use because they're in preview. So you can go out and try them at no cost. If there will be a cost later on how that will look like, we haven't talked about it yet. There is also the part for Azure Arc enabled servers. So joining a server is actually free. So you can join a server to Azure Arc. You can then do tagging. You can do inventory. That is all free. However, as soon as you use like other services, like for example, log analytics and stuff like that, or the automation part, you obviously start to pay that like it would be a server in Azure as well, right? So that is what you're going to pay for. And then there's also a cost involved for if you use the policy part. That is then a monthly cost per server. So you can check that out online. There you will find all that information out of cost. But again, there's not the standard cost by just joining the server or anything. Basically, if you just want to have first start with the inventory, you can do that basically for free. The other thing is like, why would you run, again, the reasons why you probably would run the services on-prem versus in Azure, it really depends, right? There's some scenarios where you probably just have management strategy decisions. You have like no data center available anymore because you said, okay, I don't want to pay for our data center anymore. You have customers who want to take advantage of PaaS services and modernize their applications. And again, there are many reasons why you're going to use the cloud versus on-prem, on the other way around as well, right? There are also reasons why you want to keep on using on-prem. But again, this is like really depending on the customer and the challenges you have there. Then the next question, will update management be inventory and change tracking be enabled in the future for on-prem Azure Arc enabled servers? I think I just showed you that. Yes, that is now. It was at the beginning, that was not available, and we added that, I think, back in June or something like that. So that is what I just showed you. It's now enabled or available. It's not enabled by default. You basically go out and say, okay, I want to use that for my on-prem service as well. So you can do that. What are the licensing costs? I think I just covered that again. You obviously, I think there's a just shared the link about that. What else do we have? What supported OS for Windows machines for Azure Arc Connect? So you can find that information online. I think we have currently we support Windows Server 2012 and higher in the Windows world, and we support different Linux distributions. You can find the full list on the docs page there with all the servers. I think we are working to add some other versions of Windows Server as well, but I don't think we have talked about that yet. What are the differences between security recommendations using Defender ATP? Well, it really depends on, like, there are some differences between the recommendations you get. However, I fairly agree with the latest update. They integrate into each other. So when it comes to security recommendations with Azure VMs, you get some more information also about the configuration of the VM itself, not just about the operating system. If it's for on-prem VM, I don't know if there are many really differences. I think you get like both kind of like the same recommendations. I'm using update management for Arc on-premise server with automation account, but how to enable change tracking for files? We will need to check like that, what the thing is there. I think there's some online documentation for it on that. What are the pros and cons for using Azure Arc on-premise VMware service infrastructure? So this is a good question. I would say, again, it depends. So you can use your Azure Arc for your VMs running on VMware on-prem. I don't think there's a downside of doing that. It just provides you with the additional management experience I just showed you. What do we see here? Is it possible to use dependencies on-prem servers, such as servers are connected to what servers, similar to service map? Yes, absolutely. So with the inside part, you get that. You get that as well. Off topic, any updates on biceps? I can't speak for the biceps team. I think right now we didn't have any updates on that to share, but obviously keep an eye out. I think the team is working hard on that. What are the limitations on using Azure Arc in Azure that really bug you out? That's a good one. Well, I love to have even more services to come, right? I mean, we have obviously like a lot of management experience for different parts of service. So I would love to, I think one of the things I'm not necessarily a super fan of right now is if I just want to send a short command to a server, I can do that using the custom script extension. However, I would just love to directly connect, but that is just me. I know we have solutions for this other than that, but again, this is just something with me. I'm more interested in what are your things. So again, feel free to ping me later on. You can find my connection on the homepage. It's possible. So I want to go. I don't want to spend too much time. I'm already over. So I will go for one more here. Where does management in WAC versus Arc server different? And are Arc servers just another tool to use differently? So this is actually a good one. I mean, because we have also Windows Admin Center to manage servers and HCI clusters. It's kind of like a different way. This is more a technical tool, if you will, like going in, doing like certificate changes, managing file changes, registry, doing update on that. And it can be completely used detached from Azure, right? But as soon as you want to do it maybe at a little bit more scale and build automation around it and want to have some alerting and monitoring and all that, then you basically start using Arc. And again, this is a combination of tools, right? They're not necessarily versus each other. They're probably in many cases you use both. I use both. For example, the WAC, the Windows Admin Center tool, allows you, like the things I showed you with the script, the WAC, the Windows Admin Center tool also has a button in the settings to like go through a wizard to onboard that server to Azure Arc, so you can then use both. So again, not necessarily against each other to that. What ports does Azure Arc use? Well, we just use outgoing port 443 to some Azure APIs. So you can look this up, which URLs are these. We don't have any incoming ports which need to be open. It's just like outgoing connection, which needs to be accessed to Azure Arc. It often says, like in documentation things, it needs to internet connectivity. That's kind of like true, because actually it doesn't need necessarily a full internet connectivity. It needs just access to specific Azure APIs, right? So I know there are many more questions. I just don't want to spend too much time on that right now, and I want to be careful of people's time. With that, I really want to say thank you for having me. Again, feel free to reach out to me on Twitter or on my page. And again, it was an honor to be here. Very many great questions here today. And I hope I can be in Iceland in the future in person.
Well, thank you, Thomas. This is great. And you can hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, good. I've been having an issues with my headphones, but it seems to be okay now. But yeah, thanks for giving your time to us. It was really interesting. As I mentioned in the announcement, that you have a web page that people can read on different blogs that you posted, and of course can follow you on LinkedIn. And hopefully you will come to Iceland very soon when the COVID is over.
Yep,
we would
I hope so.
Very like to have you here.
I hope so too. I'm really looking forward to hopefully one day join Iceland. Heard many great things. Obviously, it's beautiful. Like see all the beautiful pictures. So I definitely want to join one day.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much. And see you later.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Yeah. Bye-bye.